Alright guys, foolin coming to you with another video. Shout outs to the whole LDBC. So in this video, man, I kind of want to talk about this article I recently read. It's just about the whole thing going on in Europe, man. As most Africans, they migrate to Europe out of necessity. They migrate to Europe because of the circumstances back home. I can speak to many of my family members, man. I have family in Portugal, I have family in Spain, have a few who went to Italy and France, London, and it was just due to necessity. We had, the conditions back home did not permit us to really obtain a high standard of living or a decent standing of living. So, we have no choice but to go to these places. So, in this article, man, they say that, the large African diaspora in Portugal basically grew larger, and when the Africans did go to Portugal, I think what happened is that, even under fascism, because at the time Portugal was under a fascist guy. I believe his name was Salazar, who even said that Africa does not exist. Even under that time, I think there were still Africans going to Portugal. As a matter of fact, I think there were African students who would go to Portugal, and so they would study there. Some would return back to Africa, whereas some would just stay and have their life. Lisbon, has a very large community of Africans. And this I want to say that this newspaper or whatever is a very right-wing newspaper that I'm reading. I'm reading this, and so if it sounds like propaganda, that's because it kind of is propaganda. The newspaper goes on to say that, African communities, commit violence. Sometimes they end up in death. The police manage to keep order and safety in the neighborhood. They go on to say that, that Africans adopt the new woke and intersectional mentalities from the United States. And they organize groups and do protests and riots like the one that happened late January. And then they said that thousands of properties and things were burnt, and police were chased from African neighborhoods, and that it ended in a brawl. And they said this new American wokeness is widespread among the media, vilifying Portuguese officers and undermining the work of police criminals. It says police equal bad and criminals equal good. Well, here's the thing, man. The police in Portugal, man, they learn from the best teachers, and they learn from police over here, man. I'm just gonna be real with you. I mean, I'm just keeping it like a buck when I say, like, you know, you know, there have been many, you know, police related shootings, you know, based on like race. You know, I'm just being real when I say that the police are in Portugal are race soldiers too, man. You know, I'm just gonna be real with you. I mean, let's do some history, man. Like, for example, like 8 Portuguese police officers, you know, they were found guilty of actually kidnapping and beating up 6 black youth. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they did, man. Like, they beat them up, you know. And this is just what it is, man. I'm just being real with you. Like, this, I mean, and even the compensation that the victims receive ain't really nothing, man. They said that, you know, the compensation was 10,000 euros for one guy, 8,800 euros for one guy, and then 11,200 for another guy. You know, like, that's nothing. You know, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, man. Like, this newspaper is really kind of holding out, like, the racism of the police. You know, I'm sorry to say it, but the police in Portugal, man, they still have some you know, some of that fascism that they, you know, used to have in the past. You know, there's another story, you know, there's another story about it. I'm gonna look for it real quick, because, like, that race, the march which they're talking about was against the fascism and things like that, you know. And let me look for another story in which I found that I was like, damn, like, this happened close to home, you know. Because okay, another thing that happened, you know, another thing that happened is you know, you know, one guy is one guy is traumatized, you know, from the police. You know, what happened is that what happened is basically you know, a guy was beat up by the police and shot with rubber bullets, you know. He was a Cape Verdean immigrant, you know. And so they just beat him up, shot him, and started yelling racial slurs and left him traumatized, man. And, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, at the end of the day, you know, this newspaper is kind of dumb for leaving out these things, you know. Now let's continue what this paper says. Worse than the demonization of the Portuguese police, who risked their lives in order to protect the common citizen and ensure some order in these Africanized neighborhoods, it's the Africans who are now trying to ensure some order in these. Okay, I read that already. Who are now trying to achieve position of power in the coming elections in October, infiltrated in the far left, some of them already being employed and paid with taxpayers' money, like Mahmoudou Ba, a parliament assessor, Senegalese with Portuguese citizenship, and president of the movement SOS Racism, called Portuguese police shitty cops. Ironically, the reaction towards his statement sparked so much fury in the public that he needed police protection himself. Well, here's the thing, man. If the police are showing a pattern against immigrants and against Africans, then I can see why he said that. Like, even me, when I visit my family in Portugal, don't be surprised if a cop will pull you over and ask you for your papers, like just walking the street. Like, I can attest to that shit happening, man. So, like, I understand where he's coming from. Like, sure, he could have probably worded it differently, but at the same time, it's like, if they're not showing you anything different, why word it differently? So let's continue with this article. Fast forwarding a few months, we have a gift that keeps on giving. Josine Qatar Morea, the Black Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a woman from Guinea-Bissau who ran for European Parliament elections for the far-left party Livre, who claimed in a very crowded theater room that Europe is not white. The audience of mainly white European leftists who was equally deranged cheered for their demise. Her wokeness actually cost votes for the party in the European elections, but they are confident she will sit in October in the national elections. Well, the thing is about, like, me personally, I think that, like, because, like, I guess you can say Ilhan Omar is doing it here and whatnot, I think that, like, Africans getting involved in Westminster politics, it doesn't really serve a purpose, because I think that, like, we'll never get the respect in the political realm, like, if we don't fix what's going on back home. So, like, it's like, okay, we enter these politics, we enter these, like, Westminster politics, but at the end of the day, like, these Westminster politics don't really serve a purpose for us, like, so this is my thing. I think that, like, if the Westminster politics serves a purpose for us, then I would be like, okay, that's good that we have some representation, and that representation is actually doing things on the ground level for us, like building programs, like community centers, like training and things like that, empowering us wherever we're at, Then I would be like, okay, cool. Then get your spot. But the problem is, it doesn't. You know what I mean? And so let's continue on. In June, SIC, a Portuguese news station with ties to Bilderberg Group, made a special report divided in three called Invisibles. Basically a clientele of how black people are invisible in Portuguese society, because despite making whatever % they make of the country, claiming that they are seen as lesser due to not being present in position of power, not having quotas for entering public office. In the last statement, in the last segment of the report, another Senegalese African woman, Beatrice Diaz, running for parliament of another far-left party, Bloca de Esquerda, which is actually well-poetic, claimed the fact that Portugal had a colonial project, occupied territories in African countries, subjugated and destroyed civilizations, all contributed to creating an idea of white superiority over others. And that, of course, had to be corrected with social justice. Well, I'm not going to lie. She's not really lying. I mean, I'm just going to be real. Like, if I go to one of my uncles and ask him what kind of torture and what kind of things they went through fighting for freedom and independence, they're going to tell me a lot of things that are not really for the faint of heart. They're going to tell me that, Portuguese actually forced labor on Africans. They did have this complex of that they were superior and that Africans couldn't govern themselves. So, I mean, she's not lying. So I don't see what the problem is. But my thing, I guess you can say with this, is that if these Africans, want to get involved in politics, their best bet will have to be to make their own party themselves. It wouldn't be beneficial for them to join these far left parties. They should start their own parties that are non-aligned, and that basically, do this. And the thing is with this newspaper, it's just blatantly, what I'm going to say is it's just blatantly, like far right, and very biased, not even trying to call it down the middle. So now, let me see. Well, it says basically in the word of words that, Portugal is walking a dangerous path. Racial tensions with these imported minorities are at their highest. Crime is rising across the Lisbon area, with news of robberies and stabbings rising in the capital every week, with police force being further discredited by the mainstream media, and now possibly with these new African woke politicians. No one knows where this will quite end, but it won't be pretty for sure. So this guy who wrote it, I don't want to make him famous or anything, but, you can assume that he's a white Portuguese. But the thing is, man, it's like when people write these kind of articles, they're not like really getting down to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is they're over in Africa doing the same shit that they're talking about us doing. If I go to Cape Verde right now, if I go to Guinea-Bissau right now, if I go to Angola right now, I'm going to see a Portuguese being the head honcho of a multi corporation, and I'm going to see the African on the bottom working for scraps. You know, I'm gonna see my brother, you know, being exploited in our own country, basically. So what do? We go to the exploiter's country, man. That's why it really like boggles my mind that, you know, Donald Trump and all these other politicians have the nerve to like talk so ill about us, right? But they're not talking about like the cause of us being where we are, you know? And I know that some of it has to do with our leadership. I know that's a factor in this whole equation. But the real thing needs to be asked: who benefits from the leadership that's in power? You know, that serves an agenda and that feeds these foreign corporations. Who benefits? Okay? Who wouldn't benefit if there was a leader in power who just cared about the welfare of Africans? Who wouldn't benefit? So that's the thing with these European countries, man. It's a catch-22. Like, you guys, you know, you want to talk bad about us and stuff like that dude, but you don't want to fess up to the responsibility that you guys dealt with, or that you guys basically put on us. You know, like, so this is why I'm like, okay, well, why are you like complaining about us when you're not complaining about what caused us to come over here anyway, you know, and caused us to immigrate? This is what I'm not getting. Like, it makes no sense to me, you know. But, you know, with that being said, man, you know, I was talking to a Portuguese woman, and she's in denial. She's in complete denial. You know, I was talking about it, like, but she overheard it. I said, you know, cause, you know, a relative of mine just, like, hit me up about, like, how, like, her son basically was playing soccer, and, you know, he had to deal with derogatory chants in the game, you know. But I was, like, saying, like, you know, Portuguese is very racist, you know. I'm saying that it's, you know, it's a very, very racist society, you know what I mean? I mean, they'll call you terms like "hey preto" or "hey preta." You know, they'll give you these terms when you're just walking down the street. So yeah, there is casual racism and things like that in Portugal for sure. Now, the one thing about it is, you know, is this lady tried to deny it, man. She tried to be like, oh, you know, there's no racism in Portugal. Oh, you know, they said Portugal is like the least racist place in Europe. Oh, you know, there's many intermarriages and, you know, interracial marriages. Oh, you know, it has a very little problem with racism and things like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, why are you in denial of these things, man? Like, chill out. But I mean, I will say this, that there are indeed, like, elements African elements that do contribute to crime in these European countries. I will say that, you know, we're not free, and our plates are not clean, you know, completely. I'll give you that. But at the same time, you know, we have to be real with ourselves that, you know, I don't know if Europe was expecting to get mass immigration, how it gets right now. But, I mean, I would say that Europe should have prepared for, like, immigration en masse. Seeing that, you know, they didn't want to let Africa go. And that we just have independence by flag, basically. But at the end of the day, you know, when you look at Africa, name me one African country that has nationalized resources, that the resources are nationalized, and that there's actually an industry that cultivates those resources and puts them back into things like schools and like infrastructure. Name one African country that has that privilege right now. You can't name one. Because, again, we're still neo-colonized. We're still living under the colonial yoke. And that's just it. So that newspaper article, they really need to chill out. You know, you can tell it was a far-right article. But they didn't really tell the full story, you know. But anyhow, man, that's all I got for now, man. Leave your thoughts, leave your comments, and let me know what you think about this whole thing. Foolin signing out. Njaro.